What's going on, guys? Billy here, and the Mavic 3 just received its January firmware update. This is the update that DJI said would add more features, thus making this drone quote-unquote complete. Now, they kind of split this update up into two different updates. So we got the first part in December that added features like active track and hyperlapse. I would say that it added more of like the core functions of the drone a lot of people were waiting on. And with this update here in the later portion of January, it adds the rest of those features, and the patch notes are pretty promising. They add a couple of really solid features that really make this drone feel complete. So the patch notes, of course, are up on the screen if you want to go ahead and read through them. I've put in bold some of the more important features that we'll touch on more in depth here in this video, but if you want to pause it, read over those patch notes, go ahead and do that. But now we're going to move on and get into this list. So a lot of miscellaneous flight and shooting modes have been added, like the quick shots that we all know and love. With the Mavic 3, we have Droney, Rocket, Circle, Helix, Boomerang, and Asteroid, all of which have been available on drones since I believe the original Mavic Air that released in 2018. I mean, look, they work, so I guess the perfect phrase here is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The good thing about using these quick shots, though, on higher end DJI drones is that they typically give you more range and flexibility when choosing the distance that you want the drone to fly than, say, the Mini 2 would. Now, along with those quick shots, we also have panorama shooting modes added to the drone, which I actually make good use of when trying to capture structures or landscapes that simply won't fit in the frame. I never typically take full-on 360 photos in the air, but using the other options is a good way to kind of shoot a wider angle photo through stitching multiple photos together. For those of you that might be interested, they also added a burst shooting mode here to the Mavic 3, and you can also digital zoom in when shooting with the main camera. Again, this is digital. This is not going to be using that secondary tele camera. It's using the main camera with the 4/3 sensor. The next big addition in this update is the color display assist feature. So when this is enabled, your D-Log video will look more saturated with more contrast, so almost like it would in its final form after being color graded. This, of course, won't affect your final video, like the video file saved on the SD card. It's just going to appear this way through the live feed when you're flying to give you better understanding of how to properly expose your image. You can toggle this color display assist feature on and off by tapping on the three dots in the top right corner, going to the camera settings, and then scrolling down to color display assist. Now, on this topic of camera settings, I want to mention one more massive change that wasn't incorporated in the list of patch notes because it wasn't directly associated with the aircraft firmware update, but instead it was a part of the new DJI Fly app update. If you remember the old exposure settings menu, then you probably remember having plenty of headaches trying to dial in the aperture, shutter speed, or ISO. You may have also gotten annoyed going into that secondary camera settings menu that I just showed you by going to the three dots in the top right corner. Well, now everything is centralized in that one area in the bottom right corner. So now there's a small divider in the middle splitting up the general camera settings on the left and the exposure settings on the right side. Tapping on the left side opens up a small menu that allows you to change the color through white balance, the resolution, the frame rate, your storage location. You can toggle color display assist when shooting in D-Log, you can change your codec, and finally you can adjust your video format. Tapping on the exposure side opens up another menu that allows for the adjusting of your exposure settings like ISO, shutter, aperture, and your overall exposure value. You can also choose which of these are set to auto or manual. Also not associated with these camera settings in any way, but I figured I should note that the icons in the top right portion of the DJI Fly app are now more bold and easier to see. They have more defined edges and are a little bit larger, making them more prominent. That change in the camera settings menu really is aesthetically pleasing. I think that it's well laid out, it's easy to find exactly what you're looking for, and I like that it doesn't take up the full width of the screen. It just is kind of like a half menu over on the side. But what I think is more important is that it's functionally better than what we had before because we don't need to go digging through two separate menu systems. Instead, everything is right there in the bottom right corner. Okay, moving on, the next three bullet points are relatively smaller, but once we get through these, we then get into what I believe is like the meat and potatoes of this update. So we've got the ability to shoot 4K video at 60 frames per second and manually control our exposure when shooting with master shots. We've also got the ability to access the quick transfer feature, so that's going to transfer files from our drone to our remote a little bit faster. Also, we can now use digital zoom and we can shoot in D-Log when using the focus track flight modes. So those are like active track, spotlight, and the other one is waypoints. Okay, so from there, like I said, moving into the meat and potatoes of our patch notes here, the return to home behavior is something that always really annoyed me. Like, I think that the technology of advanced return to home is cool and helpful, but at the same time, I would prefer my drone to just just fly straight up to a predefined altitude and then straight back to me. This cuts out a lot of variables that the drone would have to try and avoid on its way back, and I just don't think that DJI's obstacle avoidance system is ready for a task like that with its current sensor array and software. So now within the DJI Fly app, you can tap on the 3 dots in the top right corner, and under this first safety section, you can scroll down and toggle between advanced and straight line RTH. When using the straight line RTH, which is what all previous DJI drones have used for as long as I can remember, you can select that predetermined altitude that the drone will fly up to. Now this next change is huge for Cine version owners of the Mavic 3. Of course, the draw of this more expensive version is the ability to shoot in ProRes 422 HQ. It's a higher fidelity codec that of course requires the 1TB SSD built into the drone for the faster write speeds and for the massive amount of storage that can only store like an hour and a half of 5.1K video, just to give you a sense of how big the files are. But again, you need that fast write speed because of how much data is being written at the time of shooting video. And whenever you would plug this drone into your computer to edit off of or to dump the footage, the drone would be on the entire time that it's plugged in, which was incredibly annoying. But now within the camera settings, you can toggle USB mode to on, which alters how the drone behaves when plugged into a computer through the USB port. So basically the way that this works is when you open up your computer, and of course when you plug your Mavic 3 into the computer, turn it on, it's still going to go through like its boot up process here. So you'll see that the motors kind of twitch, it initializes the ESCs. Also the gimbal like kind of turns on, but it stays still. The lights turn on and everything like that. So it goes through this initial boot up process. But if you've got USB mode turned on, then the drone actually just kind of turns off. So the gimbal goes limp, the motors aren't engaged whatsoever. The fan is turned off. You'll see now all the lights turned off. So now it's in USB mode. I still have access to my SSD here inside of the drone. And what's great is it's not draining a ton of power, and also I'm not like burning out the motors on the gimbal. So overall, this is a great function to add for Mavic 3 Cine owners. Now the next bullet point in the patch notes here claims that the accuracy of the colors has been optimized, which I wasn't able to tell any differences just by looking at the footage, but hey, any change forward is a step in the right direction. And now the final major change in this firmware update is something that I think I am most excited for, and that is the increase of image sharpness when shooting with the tele camera, so that secondary 7x zoom lens. I always thought that this lens was gimmicky. I mean, yeah, it's cool, but the settings are severely limited and the images always appeared soft. After this update though, I think that this lens is actually very usable. So if we look at the images taken at 7x, 14x, and 28x, all from the tele camera before the update, they all really just don't look good at all. Even the 7x, when using the full sensor with no digital zoom, looks like something straight out of a 2015 camera. Remember, this is a full half-inch sensor that should be capable of shooting a very usable image. After that update though, the images at all focal lengths have improved substantially, producing a sharper, clearer image. You can tell when digitally zooming in 14 and 28 times, there's some sort of post-processing happening within the app, whether it's digital sharpening or a mixture of exposure and contrast adjustments, but whatever is happening is definitely better than the images captured before the firmware update. I don't think that I would ever actually share images captured at 28 times. I mean, it's a cool feature to use when scouting around, which is probably why they call this the Explorer mode, but I could see myself getting some cool parallax shots using the 7x lens, because without any digital zoom, the images look really nice and really clear. Now all DJI needs to do is give us the ability to capture raw photos and manually adjust our exposure, and this would be even more of a usable camera. So from here, the rest of the patch notes are fairly minor changes. I think that the one that is worth mentioning is that now the RC Pro here is compatible with the Air 2S. I hope that they continue to open up more compatibility to other older drones. I mean, I think that this blows away the original smart controller in terms of quality and what it offers in terms of like the software experience, but it's good to see that they made it available for the Air 2S, because the Air 2S is like my second favorite drone. I still fly that drone all the time. So now that I can use my RC Pro with the Air 2S is definitely a nice addition. And so with that, that is our firmware update here, the January update for the Mavic 3. I've been flying this drone all day, every day. I'm loving it, and it continues to get better with these updates. So let me know your thoughts about this update and this drone, the Mavic 3, in the comment section below. And as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.